we go, everybody. There we are. Should be up. Yes. There we are. All right. Hey, Marcia. We're all set except for this open window back here, so take care of that.
And the even more torrid band who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable, in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago. And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
All right, that should handle it all. I found an ad for a movie called The Mysterians. Did I just wake up? It's been an ADHD kind of day, let's just say that. I have gotten 0 done today. But hey, Karen, Cindy, Susan, Elaine, Jeannie, Kathleen, Heather, Leah. Hey, Belle over there on YouTube. Hey, Timothy, Octavio, Julianne, Chris, Karen, all kinds of people I missed back there. Hey, Emily, hey, Sue. Welcome along. Mysterious Chicago Tours. And hey, look who's here. Hey, Miles. I need a drink. Working on decoupaging Village Voice ads all day. Just when I think I'm about done, I realize how interesting the 1969 ads are. You got like ads for Woodstock, ads for a lot of the same people who were playing the same clubs 10 years earlier. So interesting. I think this is, this is 64. Joan Baez at Forest Hills, Celebrity Hootenanny, the Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem on a bill with Thelonious Monk. Come on! Hey. Miles. Velma is trying to swat at Miles' tail. Good luck with that, Velma. Hey, Megan. Is the S missing? Good question. There you go. Aw, hey, Julius. How you doing, Julius? Hey, Beth. Evening, everybody. Let's see if I can find this movie ad. Yeah, here we go.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Hey, everybody. Welcome along. Found this movie ad from the Village Voice. Don't know what the apostrophe is there for. Oh, I guess, no, that's weird quoting. Hey, Bob, I just got your message. I haven't made up my mind about Rose Hill yet. I'll make it up probably later tonight, but so far I've only sold like a ticket. You got Pride Weekend and everything coming up, so. Miles. I'll see this guy. Look at this guy. He got a new drinking fountain this week. And he seems to enjoy that very much. Hey, Gene. Hey, Crit. Hey, everybody. We gotta find. I've been so busy with everything that I have not even looked up what this movie is. But it's showing on 7th and 12th. Whatever year I took this one from. 1959. No, I pushed the wrong button. Ah, Miles, you're not helping here. I know you're trying to. I appreciate you trying to. I really do. You came along. Hey, everybody.
Every night I'll tell the stars above you to say again I love you with all my heart.
1957 Japanese film about aliens invading. Definitely sounds like MST3K material. It's Japanese sci-fi UFO invasion movie. Well, alright. Miles found a favorite spot yet? He's found many spots around here. His favorite are in drawers, really. No, he doesn't really have a particular favorite spot yet, except for right here, whenever I'm broadcasting. We're gonna let Miles, Benny Goodman keep on going for a second here. I got so caught up with work stuff, with decorating stuff, I'll just be honest here, all day. Evening, Luann. Hey, everybody. We're going to let Benny go a couple more minutes. I was about a minute or so late getting on anyway. From the studio that brought you Godzilla, the Mysterians. I really got to get going on Mystericon. Are people coming to Mystericon this year? Is this going to be a thing? I mean, like, it's been such a tumultuous month. I haven't shown you my CTA themed bathroom. Probably won't. You can announce a hotel week this week. All right, excellent. Oh, thank you, Paula. Okay, I wonder, the numbers aren't as high these days. I need to do something to kickstart things. But all right, we'll start getting stuff booked. Having been such a tumultuous 6 weeks or so, I wasn't sure what was up. Also, when I notice I'm only selling one ticket for a weekend. That'll probably, so maybe don't buy one right now. If you want to, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll just probably have to call it.
And they all loved it. They all loved those bastards when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
It's been a year for sure. Particular 6 weeks. Oh, well, thanks, Lynn. This is, I didn't do anything to my hair today. Hair. Well, I got it wet and ran a brush through it at some point. Then I took a nap in it. What am I drinking? I am drinking some Buffalo Trace. Miles! Look at you! Look at this guy just hamming it up and hamming it up and hamming it up. But it is time to get started properly here. We're going to have to pause the Benny over here and get started properly. So, I was supposed to be on this whole time. Sorry about that. I was supposed to be like this. Every now and then I forget to put it on the proper thing, partly just because I want to show off my new place. See the on-air sign in the background? That doesn't work quite the way I want it to, but, Alright, so welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours, author of such hit books as Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, Murder Maps USA from Thames and Hudson, Smart Alec's Guide to American History, that's in this deck too, and Just Kill Me, a novel about a ghost tour guide who makes places more haunted by killing people at them. Megan Hensky, the main character, and that was named after Judy Hensky, who is in many of the Village Voice ads that I'm working on now. She did like a radio show with Shel Silverstein, and in 1963, the ads for her album called her the Bitchin' Judy Hensky. 1963. I guess they used that word in American Graffiti, too. So, all right, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about Strange Tales of Lakeview and Lincoln Park. Last year, we did a brand new one of Strange Tales of Rogers Park. We're going to go a little bit further south now. Lincoln Park is kind of... Lakeview and Lincoln Park are just a little bit north of the Loop. Couple of neighborhoods above it, above the main downtown of Chicago, and they do happen to have a number of excellent stories. So, let's go ahead and start with a few of these. There was one of them there is one place that I worked on myself. I worked on the investigation some years back. The dog just rolled her eyes at me and walked away. Well, that's not very nice. But I felt that before. All right, so this is over on Halstead, this is a place called the Golden Dagger. When I was first investigating it, it was known as the Tonic Room. Now, this is a bar that's got some stories behind it. They like to say on the inside that it was a North Side mob hangout in the 1920s, which is not entirely impossible. They even say they have seen the ghost of a guy who looks like he's a 1920s gangster. They assume that he is a gangster. I don't know why. Pretty much everybody dressed the same way in the 1920s, every man anyway. But back in the 1970s, well, here's the thing. The reason they call it the Golden Dagger today is when they were digging out the basement in the early 2000s, they found a dagger. It was a very, very rusty dagger with a skull head and some crossbones down below. It was buried underneath the ground down in the basement of the place. And of course, you start thinking about human sacrifices and stuff. It probably isn't that far off. You see, in the 1970s, this place was an occult bookshop. So it was a shop with books about witchcraft and what we now call neo-paganism and stuff. The article about this in the Chicago Tribune is really pretty good for a 1970 article about neo-paganism. Which was then still really a very new thing. So exactly how this relates to the dagger found buried here is really anybody's guess, except we know that it was also a meeting place of a group called the Sabians, which are... broadly, we would define them as a cult. They're very into, like, ancient Egypt and Babylon type stuff. There was also some talk that it might have been a meeting place for a group that was into Aleister Crowley stuff. Hard to say for sure, but it is said to be haunted, and they do have this dagger, which I don't know how easily they bring this out now. But they would bring it out. The blade was just nothing but rust. It looked like you got stabbed with that thing, you're going to die. Even if it doesn't break the skin very much, you're probably going to get gangrene. And whatever other diseases you can get. But let's move right across the way from that. Just across the road on Halstead. Just a little below Boys Town. It is Pride Weekend after all. Is Lil Street, named after the Lil Diversey Brewery. Usually at the Rose Hill tours, I'll talk about Mr. Lil and the big sex scandal of 1862. But here we are just going to talk about a little bit of the side street off of Halstead. Right at this corner, back in the 1800s, was a haunted house. Now, they renumbered all of the streets back in 1909, so there isn't 1195 anymore. It would have been in the corner of Lille and Halstead. You can see right there, the southwest corner of Halstead and Lille, right where this place with the turret is. But it was a rickety old frame building that no longer survives. This is an older building that is standing here now, but it's no longer present. So the story was that this was a tavern with apartments up above it, and they said that nobody could sleep in the garret up on the top floor, because every time they did, they would wake up in the middle of the night seeing a ghost standing in front of them holding a handful of burning sulfur. They would actually bet people $5 they couldn't spend the night in that place. Now, we're modern people today. I have to assume that somebody was dressing up like a ghost to scare these people. But it was a story that got considerable circulation. I haven't really looked this one up in some of the newspapers that have been digitized. I really ought to look this one up again. Always something to put on the Patreon, I suppose. This week on the Patreon, we are talking about Kitty Toohey, the daughter of the namesake of Toohey Avenue, and her spurned love affair of 1895, when she dreamed of going up to a land up above where they don't reprimand their daughters. Wisconsin. Didn't work out as well as she thought. But right near where we are here, we're going to move just a little bit over and see the current location of the Kingston Mines. One of fairly few blues clubs that are still left in Chicago. There really aren't that many. It's one of the first things tourists ask me for is, where are all the cool blues clubs? It's like, in 1940. Go back to 1955, you get all the blues you want. They tore them down to put up IIT. But the old Kingston Mines location was a couple of blocks from here. It's worth bringing up because it was the first place that presented the musical Grease. And this is a very early version of Grease. I know a guy who worked on the original New York version that played over on 2nd and 12th in New York, but that was when they were actually turning it into a proper show. This was the late 1960s. 1950s nostalgia was still a very new concept, but it was about to really take off. And when they had Grease showing here, it wasn't really the same show you see now. In the original drafts, Summer Lovin' was called Foster Beach. Foster Beach happened so fast. But at the time, there wasn't really a plot. It was just a handful of songs and some really dirty jokes. The original version of Grease was much, much dirtier than it is today, than the version you see today. And when it made it to Broadway, some of the original people involved were just disgusted. It's like, man, now they've done with the 50s exactly the same stuff they did with the 20s. They turned the whole decade into a theme park. Which, of course, is exactly correct. Well, let's move a little bit further up on the Halstead Street area. This is a place I've spoken about a few times over the years. This is the Benny's Beverage Depot that is built into the old Ivanhoe Theater. This was a theater that had a place called the Catacombs down below. Now, Tom Waits played here in the 1970s, which makes this the place to go to buy alcohol in Chicago. I believe that it is a scientific fact that alcohol purchased at a place where Tom Waits performed in the 1970s is superior to any alcohol that you would buy anywhere else. The same bottle bought at a different place will not taste as good as a bottle purchased right here. Unfortunately, this particular Buffalo Trace was not from this Benny's. But I'm always up to going there again. Let's just move across the street from this place. Just stories for days all up and down here. Now, right across from the Benny's. Now, you got the old bookstore that had books that were rare, medium, or well done. And then you've got this building. Now, right up here, if somebody told me that this building used to be a brothel back in the day, that's the kind of thing people always like to say. This building was a cat house back then. Actually does happen to be true in this case. Now, in 1931, there was a woman named Helen Deal over here on Wellington. Now, Helen Deal was lured to Chicago from Fort Wayne with the promise of a job, of good employment. It turned out that job was working as a masseuse. So she ended up working at this building, but it was not really massage as her job. She was providing sexual favors. Worked there, then then lived in the apartment of her boss, Colentino, who was also supposedly her boyfriend. But after 2 weeks, she ran into his room and grabbed a gun. And he just laughed and said, "Yeah, right. I dare you to shoot me." That's not something you want to go around saying to someone who is pointing a gun at you. So she did in fact shoot him right in the neck and then shot herself in the shoulder. So he died and she was taken in for murder, and after the coroner's jury investigated, they were all set to have her indicted and turned over for murder, but very quickly it was ruled that she had acted in self-defense. The police decided to prosecute her on this, and she said, "I am glad that I didn't succeed in killing myself. Maybe life still holds a pleasure for me yet." Now, at the time, it was the shooting took place here. It took place in the Diversey Park Arms Hotel. This busted up the whole thing over near Diversey and Halstead. Let's keep on moving. We're going to move a little bit down Roscoe Street here. This is right near the boyhood home of the author Daniel Pinkwater, who has an entire shelf devoted to his work over nearby me right now. So, right about here, as of 1919, this place was the home of a guy by the name of Elias Purcell. At the time, in 1919, he was the most famous songwriter ever to come out of Duluth, Minnesota, an honor that he would hold for another several years. None of his songs are particularly popular today, but in 1919, he was living in here and found dead and tied to a chair. They came to call this the mystery of 1,000 clues. Now, he was found dead, tied to a chair with a rag over his eyes. Now, as far as they could tell, there was no sign of violence. There was no sign of anything. They couldn't even determine a cause of death. They even suggested at one point that he might have frightened himself to death. Also, the kitchen door was closed but not locked. The table was set for 3, even though he was living by himself. So one person even suggested that this was suicide by willing his own heart to stop. Now, eventually the autopsy proved that it was a very unusual way to die, nicotine poisoning. Now, just a few drops of nicotine will kill you. But most people don't really go around having 3 drops of nicotine at once. They have a very tiny amount mixed into cigarettes. So nicotine sales were so rare that they could actually track down about everybody who had bought nicotine in Chicago. Usually when it was bought at all, it was bought for a pesticide to use on flowers at Rose Hill Cemetery, specifically in this case. Exactly what became of what happened here was never really determined. The police eventually ruled that it was a murder, but that was a good idea for the family because if it was a murder, the insurance company had to pay out. One of the bigger theories was that he had died by suicide, but tried to make it look like it was a murder, just because that way the family would still get the insurance payout. But the amount of money involved here made this look like it probably wasn't really the case. The place looked like it had been ransacked a little bit. The table was still set for 3. The police decided that this was camouflage. Really, it was a distraction more than that, but World War I, a couple of years before, had made everybody aware of the word camouflage, and now it was just the vocabulary word of the year, and the police couldn't wait to use it in a sentence. We should look through here. Can a man stop his own heart, then bind himself? I would think you would do it in the other order. First you bind yourself, then you will your heart to stop. Well, that's just me. Proved to be nicotine poisoning, and that just didn't help anything at all. It was eventually ruled to be a murder, but there was never a suspect. There was never a motive. There were all kinds of things about keys dangling on doors, different clues all over the place. It's a story that really deserves more of a deep dive than I've been able to give it so far. We'll get back to some of these. And one place that I did do a bit of a deep dive on, one of my favorite houses in the city, this phantasmagoric mansion, known as the Dews Mansion at 530 Wright Road, built in 1896, architects Cuttle and Hertz, who also did Cyrus McCormick's house. Built for the brewer Francis Dews. Francis Dews, brewers tended to make an awful lot of money in those days. There's a place in Wicker Park that they say was called Beer Baron Row, but nobody ever called it that back in the old days. I don't think there's any evidence that beer barons even lived there at the time. Now, it's currently owned by a property management company. They use it as an event venue sometimes, but there's not too much going on here. Now, Dews died in 1921, and at the time it became a Swedish engineers clubhouse. Why can't we get clubhouses like this anymore for such niche organizations as that? So this place was built 1896, said to have been inspired by the styles of the World's Fair. Hard to say whether that's true or not, but pretty much every bit of architecture was inspired by the styles of the World's Fair as of 1896. It's an absolutely gorgeous house. Now, in the early 1970s, the Swedish Engineers Club decided they didn't need it anymore, and by then, there wasn't really too many people who could buy the place. It needed a lot of work. It was in an area that Lincoln Park wasn't quite as ritzy as it is now. It looked like it was going on the developer's block until a guy by the name of George Santo Pietro stepped in and bought it for $73,000. Now, he had bought this place because he was starting his own men's magazine called Coq. Get it? It's a pun that works on several letters. That is French for chicken, for chick, but also there are other obvious puns that come out here too. If you're if you're starting your own men's magazine, you're trying to be Hugh Hefner, you've got to get your own Playboy mansion as well. He said he wanted this to be more of like a working class version of Playboy. Playboy in the 70s still had that sheen of Playboy in the 50s and 60s when it was all jazz reviews, ideas for how to decorate your bachelor pad. All unlike how I have decorated the place around myself right now. But he had to buy a Playboy mansion, so he said, well, hell, mansions are all right. I can understand wanting to live in a mansion. Hey, don't quote me as saying hell. My mother might be leading this. This was a guy who would drive around town in a cream-colored Excalibur while he tried to get this place off of the ground. He was also very into sushi at a time when not many people had ever tried sushi. So eventually he started talking about opening his own, and the paper said, identifying with Hugh Hefner as bunnies and sports cars is no problem, but are we ready for raw fish? George Santo Pietro is an interesting guy. The magazine fell apart very quickly. He moved out to California, fell out of the news, but then ended up back in the news when he married Vanna White. At this point, he had started a sushi restaurant in California, by some accounts the first sushi restaurant at least to cross over into popular culture, made him an absolute killing. Irv Kupchenet in Chicago mentioned that he had been romantically linked with Vanna White for a while. Said, I don't want to cause an uproar, but do you know about all of this guy's local scams? There were a lot of scams. He used to drive around town in a cream-colored Excalibur. So this he sold the mansion to, it was jointly owned by a mobbed-up disc jockey and a member of the band Chicago for a long time. It's now owned by a developing company. George Santo Pietro is currently living in Asia someplace. If you try to look him up online, you see that he was also a dolly grip on TV shows like The Mandalorian and The Good Place. That's actually his son, not him himself. I put up a couple of videos about this, and eventually he messaged me himself. He said he was going to call me. He never did call me. Fascinating story, though. But that was a story. I looked that place up for the first time I was doing this tour, and it just got weirder and weirder and weirder. But let's move a little bit north into the North Lincoln Park area, about the time when Lincoln Park starts to become Lakeview. And we find this apartment building. Back in 1978, there was a woman here by the name of Teresita Bassa. Teresita Bassa was living in this apartment. She worked over at Edgewater Hospital as a respiratory therapist. Firefighters were called to the Pine Grove Apartments here and found her stabbed to death. Another woman who worked at Edgewater Hospital, Remy Schwa, started speaking in what she said was Teresita Bassa's voice. She would go into a trance and start speaking to her husband, and eventually named the killer and the motive, a guy by the name of Alan Showery. Initially, they thought that it was a rape case, then realized that no, it was not. It was just a robbery case. So Remy worked a different shift at the hospital than Teresita had. When they started making this into a big story that a possessed spirit had named the killer, and the police took the lead on it because, they would take any tip they could get, and ended up realizing that, yes, Alan Showery actually had done it. So this is Teresita herself. This case, after he changed his plea to guilty, This became a very popular book at the time called A Voice from the Grave. So this really looked like somebody had come back from the dead and spoken through the voice of an old co-worker to finger the killer of someone she was only vaguely connected with. That's kind of what it looks like. People have had to kind of stretch on this, saying, well, she couldn't have known Teresita. They worked a different shift at the hospital. That's probably not correct. I think the most likely case here is that Remy must have known something and felt that the safest way to get that information out there was this trance thing. Maybe she wasn't even really aware that she was doing it. But I'm not really buying that the spirit came back from the dead and picked somebody so random from this. But yeah, it ended up on Unsolved Mysteries and everything. And we'll move on just across the street from there. We'll point out just fantastic architecture of the Brewster apartment buildings. These were very fashionable luxury apartments in the late 19th, early 20th century. Evelyn Campbell, the reporter who was credited with capturing H.H. Holmes, which she at least helped with anyway, lived here at the time of the Holmes trial in 1905. Let's move up the way a little bit. On Waveland Avenue. Waveland and Pine. This was the approximate home of a guy by the name of Parker Mason. The house looked about like this, or this was maybe his house and maybe his laboratory, depending on who you asked. Now, Parker Mason was a local eccentric. I don't have a lot of data about him. I know about where he is at Rose Hill Cemetery, but he was part of the whiskey ring. This was the big scandal of the 1870s, where a lot of money that was supposed to be going to the government in whiskey taxes was actually going to high-ranking government officials, all the way up to the upper echelons of the Grant administration. It was a scandal that nearly brought down the Grant administration. Of course, today it seems like it would be like a 45-minute story on CNN. But Parker R. Mason was a tough guy. He was known to threaten to kill people who got too close, and made enough money to build himself this huge compound at Waveland and Pine Grove. Now, he was said to have mostly lived in a wooden annex next to this. This was just a laboratory, and rumor was that he was working on a flying machine. You ever hear that Tom Waits song, What's He Building? He's very much that guy. All the neighbors would wander around thinking, what's he building in there? What in the hell is he building in there? Turned out he was building a windmill. But he also had a boulder on his property, this massive boulder that he wanted to be moved to Rose Hill Cemetery to function as his gravestone. If he ever did, it sure ain't there anymore. It was rumored to be a meteor from outer space among the neighbors who whispered about what this old man was building in here. It was really just from a quarry out by Ashland and Western. But strange neighbor anyway. And just up the road from him, at 3912 Pine Grove, was the place where they captured Byron Bolton, the gangster in the 1930s. Now, Byron Bolton was like a number of guys in the early 1930s, was starting to look for life beyond prohibition. Cutting off prohibition was going to be cutting off a major income stream, and one thing he got involved with was kidnapping. This was something a lot of gangsters tried to get into, kidnapping people and holding them for ransom. He kidnapped a kid named Edward Bremer. Not a kid, he was the adult son of the owner of Schmidt Beer. Held him for ransom for $200,000 before finding out that nobody liked Edward Bremer enough that they were ever going to pay $200,000 for him. But they did eventually get the money, but couldn't spend it. It was all marked bills. Now, he became a part of the Barker Karpus gang. Now, after Babyface Nelson died, the Ma Barker gang and Mal Barker and Alvin Karpus became public enemies number one. Here's Doc Barkus himself and Ma Barker, who was generally given credit for organizing the gang, but may or may not have done anything. I've never gotten too far into this. But the feds staked out this place to catch Don Barker one day. When Doc Barker ran away from the cops, he slipped in some slush and was caught. They shot one member, then the police raided this place and arrested a guy named Byron Bolton. Look at this guy. He just looks like he's going to beat somebody up. Partly because he looks like he's wearing, like, a jersey tee or something. which have other more colloquial names. So he was captured. They had been looking for this guy for a long time, ever since they found his name on an envelope in the apartment across the street from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. So the Chicago Evening American announced that he had confessed and rambled off an entire confession from him, saying exactly what had happened in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre as of 1939. The thing is, they were really just reprinting stuff that he had told his friends and had been going around for a long time. He had not, at that time, made a confession. Apparently he'd told some friends some things. The friends went to the newspaper and said, yeah, now that they've caught him, I better tell you what he told me. So they reprinted the whole thing, but then when he did make a confession to the police, it pretty much matched what the Chicago Evening American had said. He had not, J. Edgar Hoover eventually got the die talking, said it was the group that we now call the American Boys, Fred Killer Burke and Fred Getz, guys from St. Louis that are said were called the American Boys because they weren't Italian, they weren't German, they weren't Irish. We usually say now, they always want me to say on TV, Al Capone called them the American Boys. But I think it was Georgette Winkler, one of the wives of one of the gangsters, used that term. I don't think Capone ever did himself. If you asked him, he would tell you he was American. He'd get mad when people called him Italian. He was born in New York. But since we're talking about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, that was also in this neighborhood. We'll just move up and check out the space briefly here. February 14th, I know what day Valentine's Day. February 14th, 1929, on this spot was the SMC Cartage Company. Little garage. 7 members of the Moran gang were lined up and shot to death right here, but that's a story that's been retold many, many times. Often by me. I don't even know how many times. You know, when I worked the ghost tours, pretty much every kind of tour company I ever worked for on a bus, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was one of the more common stops. I've told the story a million times. We'll hold out for it on a tour that involves it a little bit more. Basically, the headline says it all. But it all happened right here. 2100 block of North Clark Street. Now, there is a ghost story here. They say that if there is fresh snow on the ground, you can see the outline of the 7 bodies who were killed here. Other versions, it has to be when it's snow on the ground, on fresh snow on the ground on February 14th. I waited years for it to be snowing on February 14th. I went out there. I didn't see anything. I left a few snow angels for the next guy. Let's move on into Lincoln Park proper. One that I covered this one on the Lincoln Park Zoo Haunted History Tours. Those are back on for this year. Now, Lincoln Park, of course, was the old city cemetery. In the middle of the grounds here was the quarry of a guy named Edwin Burkhart, a gravestone carver who was especially known for his angel carvings. He might have done this one over at Graceland Cemetery. The timeline is right. But one day, into the quarry, which would have been pretty close to where the farm and the zoo is now, a guy by the name of George Hull showed up and said, "Boys, I got a proposition for you. See, I got this friend who thinks that giants used to walk on the earth just because it says some line about it in the Bible. I want to trick him. See, I got this big block of granite. I want you to carve it into a giant so I can try to fool him. I'll pay you $50 each." It was either 50 or 100. I'll have to double check on that. But in any case, it was a lot of money for a guy who was working in a quarry for a living. So they said, "All right, we'll sculpt you a giant." He said, "All right, I'll pose for you." Then he stripped naked and got on the ground to pose. I am not sure if they asked him to do this, or if he was just like, "All right, now sculpt me, boys. Sculpt me like one of your French girls." So they sculpted a giant, and you can't actually see a resemblance if you look at the face of this thing. He took it out to New York, to Cardiff, New York, and buried it for about a year, then hired a guy to come dig a well, said, "I want you to dig it right in that spot. I got a really good feeling about that spot." And when they found this, the exact quote was, "Why, some old Indian has been buried here." Found this massive stone giant, announced that it was a petrified giant, 10 feet 4.5 inches tall, weighs 200 and... P.T. Barnum offered $150,000 for the thing. Then it came out fairly quickly. Now, a few people did go around saying, "This is real. This is definitely a real giant. This is proof of whatever my belief is. This is proof that the Bible is right about there being giants. Other people said, no, this giant is an old petrified giant who looks like a white person. This is proof that white people got to America first. As they would. Other people said, no, you can see all the chisel marks here made with metal tools. This is clearly something more modern than this. But the people who thought that it proved whatever they believed just ignored it. Till finally one of the guys worked in the quarry wrote to the Tribune and said, so we never got paid by Mr. Hull, so here's the whole story. If you need a giant carve, just call us. There were a couple of replicas made, one of which is now on display in Fort Dodge, Iowa. I just remember stopping here as a kid on the way to Lake Okoboji. We had a little pamphlet about it that I remember reading all the way up to Okoboji. It was a long, long drive, or it seemed like it in those days. This is the original, which actually did end up in Des Moines at one point. It was some guy just used it as a conversation piece in his apartment. I think the original is now in Cooperstown, if I remember right. So here's a cool old building. It's over on Addison, not far from Wrigley Field. 522 Addison. Or 510 to 534 and a half. But the apartment in question is number 522. I think I walked all the way in here for this. Why Fort Dodge? Good question. I think Fort Dodge is where he bought the gypsum to have carved into a giant. And Iowa history is not a big money maker, let's just say. I remember Iowa history class when I was in 4th grade. It's a miracle I got into history after that. In we go, in we go. But at the back of this courtyard was an apartment in 1925. This was the home of a woman by the name of Clara Hark. Now, she was already married and divorced by the age of 18. In 1925, she was a few years older and living with her new husband. Her mom had just married a guy too, so she now had a stepfather who was only a few years older than she was, and they were living up in Fox Lake. Clara would go to visit. Mom apparently got furious if they were late for dinner. After one big fight, Clara stormed out of the place, or that was the story. She stormed out and heard 4 gunshots. Police were called. Mom Lily Potts had been shot 4 times, including in the chest and the mouth. No gun was present. It was later found in the bedroom. Clara said that she had gone in to see what happened with the shots were and then went and moved the gun someplace else before her mother could crawl over to it and fire shot number 5. So really her story was that her mother had shot herself in the head repeatedly and then managed to hide the gun. So Clara was arrested for murder, naturally, and appeared in court wearing a red dress, which was considered shocking at the time. She was eventually acquitted. They had an expert come in to say that you could, in fact, shoot yourself in the solar plexus and then still fire more shots. Other experts said no, but really this was the thing. It was a common theme among reporters, especially women who wrote for the Chicago newspapers, would often complain that women were never convicted of murder in Chicago. I mean, it happened a couple of times, but they always got lighter sentences than the men got when convicted of murder. And a lot of people said this was a feminist point. They should be getting punished just the same. They should be treated just the same as the men who murder people. So, 1928, she did end up in jail for a little while. She was acquitted, then divorced again, embarked on a life of causing noise complaints and fights. 1928, there was this article by Genevieve Forbes Herrick about ladies in crime. She was one of the women reporters who complained a lot about women not being convicted. And at this time, Clara was in jail for drunkenness, and was quoted as saying, "If they think I'm getting sober, they got another think coming. I'll make so much noise in here, they have to let me out." Now, from what we can tell from the newspaper record, she spent the next several years moving around the Midwest and getting in trouble, but she disappeared from the news about the time she turned 50 in 1944. In the 1970s, years later, as an old lady, she was living with 7 cats in Palm Beach, railing against racist zoning boards. Died at the age of 83 and seems to have found something useful to do with her old age. And not too far from her place, this is a block called Alta Vista Terrace. A pre-planned block where on each side, every house is unique, but on the other side, there's like a mirror image of it. We'll just move down here a little bit and just check out some of the architecture of Alta Vista Terrace, a landmark itself. Well, while we walk here, I'll pour myself a little bit more bourbon. And just up the road a little ways, not too far from Wrigley Field, is the Hotel Carlos. Let's cover this briefly. There was a guy living here, a Cubs shortstop, named Billy Jurgis in 1932. Now, he was dating a woman by the name of Violet Valley. So were lots of other people. At one point, the Cubs and the Cardinals were both managed by people who had dated Violet back in the day. She was what was known as a baseball Annie. Baseball groupie, effectively. Kind of like the hockey puck bunnies. But Billy was not being faithful to her. I don't think he ever thought that she expected him to. So, while dating for a while, we've covered this in some other tours, but after dating him for a while and finding out that he didn't want to marry her, she walked into his hotel room here at the Hotel Carlos and shot him and then herself. Now, she shot herself in the arm. This kept Billy out of the Cubs for a while, so Billy decided just not to press charges, just make the whole thing go away. So Violet decided to cash in on her newfound notoriety by appearing in something called The Bear Cub Follies, a burlesque show. Violet Valley, the girl who shot for love. 1932 at the State and Congress Theater, a screamingly funny burlesque production. Whether she was actually a bear cub in these follies is not particularly recorded. It was some kind of like baseball song and dance. Just shortly thereafter at the World Series, Babe Ruth famously called his shot. Somebody just dug up an audio recording of Lou Gehrig talking about it like the day after, and definitely saying that Ruth had called his shot at the time. Now, calling your shot would have been a very foolish thing to do. There's a lot of debate about whether Ruth really pointed to the outfield and then hit a home run right over there. I think the evidence suggests that, in fact, he did. That's my take on it, anyway. But all right, everybody, it is 8:40, so once again, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Saturday, I haven't determined whether or not we're going to go ahead with the Rosehill Cemetery tour as of right now. Even with some advertising, I've only sold a ticket. And I can't send out mailing list stuff on it now because all of a sudden, MailChimp wants $50 a month for me to access my mailing list. Everybody's out to get me right now. Everybody's out to extract money from me these days. But that Rosehill Cemetery Tours is officially what I am promoting right this second. MysteriousChicago.com has the tickets. Or also, for today, go ahead and thanks for those of you who have kept the donations coming in. I have not had dinner yet, so the booze is hitting me a little bit harder than it normally would. It's easy to just forego dinner when you realize that there's a really good pizza place just about a block away that'll sell you a slice for under $5. I like it here in Rogers Park. So thanks everybody for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago, saying to stay safe, stay strong, and stay spooky. Let's just hang out like we always do until it's time for me to go get a slice of pizza. Here's Benny Goodman. Yeah, it's a little bit warm this weekend. Everybody's trying to get me to pay them right now. Cindy, I tried that so far. Tracy, the Pride Tours never sell at all, so I haven't done an official one yet. Audrey is JB Alberto's. And usually when I've ordered from JB Alberto's, I thought it was just okay, but the slices are great. Thanks, Steve. Everyone was asking me if it was a Frank Lloyd Wright. It is not, but it is cool. I will have to check that out. Genie, message me the link later. I can't really get them off of the comments. Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Doreen. I'm still trying out all the places in the neighborhood. There's a lot of them. Yeah, Susan, there are other services that I might have to try instead. Military tour at any cemetery. That's a possibility, Bob. That is a possibility. It'd be very easy to do. Thank you, John. Okay, can we download the Mysterians anywhere? Is it like on Amazon? It seems like the kind of movie would be on Tubi. Going back to Oakwoods. I got a private tour booked at Oakwoods next month. I gotta make sure that's still on. But ever since they made us all move our cars because Louis Farrakhan's guards didn't want to see guards when he was coming for a funeral. I should have turned to me. Didn't he just say Jews are termites? I'm just a termite. We can't drive cars.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Yeah, it's true. There are two stories about women who are said to have shot themselves in the shoulder. Actually, 3 of them. That's really kind of a running theme in this, is women shooting themselves in the shoulder. Allegedly. Making sure if the film is thought to be lost, it's possible. Let's start Googling this. Oh, the wow. Poster comes right up. I don't know if that's a vintage poster or what. There's a vintage poster. Oh, wow, it's even better. Oh, this is beautiful. I love everything about this. No, wait till you see this. As the guy in Troll 2 said, "Oh my God! From behind the moon they come to invade the earth, abduct its women, level its cities. The Mysterians." In big screen color, greatest science fiction picture ever conceived by the mind of man. Who knows what lies behind the beyond? Most people don't even know what's beyond the behind. Stole that line from Brother Theodore. who probably himself stole it from someplace else. I recognize some of his monologue lines as being just Oscar Wilde rips. That is so cool. All of the town. Oh, there's a whole trailer for it on IMDb. And it looks like you can get about the full movie without too much trouble. English dub on Daily Motion. I don't know that I can actually sit through it. The first thing that comes up on Rotten Tomatoes, when just Googling it, Rotten Tomatoes, I think Mysterians wins the award for the movie that put me to sleep the most. I honestly tried getting through this on at least 4 different occasions. Were they consecutive or non-consecutive? Ever since Grandpa Simpson said that Grover Cleveland spanked him on 2 non-consecutive occasions. He is a non-consecutive president. I've always referred to things such as that. We moshed at everything in the 90s. I got kicked in the head at a Bob Dylan concert during the acoustic set. I got kicked in the head at Counting Crows on 2 non-consecutive occasions. It is at 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. Top audience member review says, I love this movie. The music is really good. Mogera is great. I love the military. Oh my god, 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 oh my god.
Benny Goodman presents
Okay.
On the Alamo.
Other people kind of confirm that it's boring as hell. Susan, I'll believe it. If it was in the 90s, we would mosh to anything in the 90s. Evelyn and I have not encountered any gangs. And if I did, they probably would not be interested in me. How can it possibly be boring? But this is the greatest science fiction epic ever conceived by the mind of man. It says so right on the poster. I should retroactively change it to Mind of Humans, so young adult literature Twitter doesn't get on my case. Megan, that's cool. Maher, I think, is highly underrated. All of the other Prairie School guys are
The
underrated.
Congress Hotel in Chicago, and some more to.
They were the ones who mostly did the actual work of the right stuff. The tour guide at the Roby House said that Miriam Mahoney Griffin designed the designed the windows there. I like the windows. My favorite Frank Lloyd Wright stuff is the windows. If Miriam Mahoney Griffin designed them herself, I would not be surprised. I don't know if that's really documented or not. Notice I've tried to find a way to pronounce her name that's kind of in between Mahoney and Mahoney. Whichever of those I say, people will correct me. I believe she used Mahoney. But if I say Mahoney, people will write it in. Don't you mean Mahoney? Mahoney. I'm saying a little bit of both. But not enough of either. Stay hydrated, Karen. Yeah, staying spooky is all well and good.
If the dollars let it go, let it fly away. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe, it's the saying high and low. Hear it everywhere you go, any time of day. Big Ben rings it, Valley sings it, Wiseman swings it, even Mr. Crosby bings it. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe, catch the trouble by the toe. If the hollers let it go, let it fly away.
G'day, Mary. That was a good family reunion. You thought the heat wave was over? I did too. That's why I listed a tour for this weekend. Like an idiot.
And we'll let
Hey,
the
glad when
titles
this Boston
speak
trip
for
is
itself.
over, so I'll
Betty
stop
Goodman
getting this New
presenting
Haven
Manhole.
airline messaging me every 5 minutes. You all know how much I love heat waves. Look at me dancing. I am the dancing queen. I'm trying to do math and figure out if I'm now 3017. But no, I don't know how I can make that work. I say thank you for the music. The song. Oh, let's not get into an ABBA phase here. That just can't end well. It is Thursday night and the lights are low. Anybody could be that guy. I could be that guy. Good night, Debbie. It wasn't even a month ago that Don, the old guy who sits outside telling stories, told me that back in '84 he remembered it was snowing on the 4th of July. He has a lot of stories that start with back in '84, etc. Oof, Megan, I feel for you there. cooling towels. Yeah, I've tried those. Nothing actually cools you down. If you're hot, you're just hot. When you're hot, you're hot. When you're not, you're not. As that one country singer
And
sang.
here's a short encore.
I can never remember his name, but he was once a special guest on Scooby-Doo.
Let's dance.
When my grandfather played that song in the car, I thought it was the worst thing I had ever heard in my whole entire life. Was it Tom T. Hall, really? Tom T. Hall, the I Love guy? Jerry Reed, that's correct. Now, Tom T. Hall, there is a gravestone here in Chicago with a Tom T. Hall lyric about the afterlife printed on it. Because up in Park Ridge, at Town of Maine Cemetery, a line about how in the afterlife it'll be older whiskey and younger women. If you can't be a bit of a creep when you're dead, when can you be a bit of a creep? Well, all right, Benny Goodman is wrapped up. That means it is time for me to wrap up as well. Thank you for joining me, everybody, for Strange Tales of Lakeview and Lincoln Park. I was drinking before I have had dinner, which is never the wisest of ideas. Thanks for those of you who have kicked in donations to help me keep these particular lights on. So thanks, everybody, for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling everybody to stay safe, stay strong.